Warhammer Underworlds released in 2017 with some fanfare. It was a new approach for Games Workshop. It was a competitive board game using miniatures and a deck of cards. Like most people in the hobby, I picked up the Shadespire box set and was impressed enough to get a few different warbands, mostly due to the miniatures and the novelty of having small painting projects. I played a handful of games and enjoyed it, but eventually I dropped out when I realised that I needed to keep buying warbands just to get the universal cards to keep up to date. Since then, although Underworlds has at times intrigued me, I never felt like I could get back in because I'd already missed out on so much. Now, Games Workshop have made a lot of good changes since then, with a sensible ban and restricted system and a rotation for the format. But there was still a significant buy-in and a commitment to keep buying if you wanted to keep up to date. Last year, a new format was introduced, Rivals. This removed the deck building element, giving players a pre-built deck in the warband box that was ready to play. This is a fantastic idea in principle, and is a great way to introduce new people to the game. But unfortunately it has multiple issues for me. Only the newer warbands are being designed with Rival in mind, so there can be a significant difference between out-of-the-box factions. Of more relevance to me as a returning player, the Season 1 and Season 2 warbands can't be played out of the box, as they don't have enough cards to make a legal deck without some universal cards. To account for this, GW brought in some pre-built Rival decks that you could purchase. Unfortunately, the only available deck on release was the Silent Menace deck, which wasn't actually a deck, it was originally intended to be just a card expansion. Since then, we've had the Illusionary Might deck, which is better, but by all reports is quite weak. And that's it. Only one Rivals deck, and it might not even fit your Warband's playstyle. Really disappointing. I would have expected maybe 3 different Rivals decks, so you could tailor it to the Warband you're interested in, but I understand the Rivals format is really intended for the new Warbands. Lastly, and perhaps ironically, the lack of deck building is a problem for me. I definitely don't want to go through 1,000 cards, but a little bit of deck building would have been nice. This seems to be a common thought, as an unofficial but popular format is the Rivals Plus or Warlords format. It first appeared at Warhammer World event Clash of Warlords, where players could pick a warband and a card pack, and then build their deck out of just those cards. This format is incredibly exciting for me, although it does still need some work. Currently, the available card packs being used by the format are the Essentials pack, the Silent Menace deck, and the Illusionary Might deck. To the best of my knowledge, everyone just picks the Essentials pack, as the other 2 are quite poor. This format really reduces the entry level requirement. As a new player, I could pick up the core set, which will give me all the tokens and boards I need, along with 2 warbands. Then I buy 1 card pack, and now I've got a competitive deck. As an old player with some Shadespire and Nightvault cards, I was able to pull up the list of cards from the Essentials pack on underworldsdb.com and find them in my collection. Although my options were limited, I was able to put together a few Warlord legal decks, so now all of my old warbands are back in action. Since I don't have to worry about buying every single Underworlds box that comes out, I can justify picking up the occasional warband that takes my fancy, doubly so for those warbands that I'll also use in Warcry. At just €15.75, I'll probably pick up the Essentials pack as well to round out my options. Rumours are that GW quite likes this Warlords format, and might be considering it as the future of the game. If that was the case, it would really reduce the entry barrier for new players, and if done right, could still retain Underworld's crown as a competitive game. Now bear with me. Moving from a format where you have 600 universal cards to just 1 pack of 60 might strike you as less competitive, but typically the cards played at the top level are a quite small percentage of the overall pool. In a competitive card game, you'll often see the top 3 cards appear in all the top decks. In effect, the real pool of cards is a tiny sliver at the top. If Games Workshop were to release a series of competitive rival decks, maybe 2 decks released each season so you have 4 legal at a time, each deck might have some top cards, but you have to decide which of those decks to play. You have less cards in total, but the range of options at the top level has actually increased. New players could still pick up one and have all of the options they needed for that deck, but more competitive players could look at combining each of those decks with the entire set of warbands they have. Having spent the time to go through my collection, I now have some Warlord legal decks. I pulled out the new rules PDF, figured out what boards are legal, and realised that I could use the old Rubble hexes as Gloom hexes for the new season's rules. That'll be enough to get a few fun games in, and hopefully be ready for the future of Warhammer Underworlds. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and comment.